I have a 2022 Tiffin Midas 24RT motorhome that experienced a furnace problem. Now the furnace is a Suburban NT-20SQ. What would happen is the blower fan would come on and the furnace would light, but cycling back on once it got hot was intermittent, requiring me to reset the thermostat, and usually this was in the middle of the night. As time went on, eventually the furnace would go through the blower startup process, but it never would ignite the propane, and eventually it would stop. I identified the problem to be a bad circuit board. Now the circuit board functioned properly, except for sending a spark to the igniter, so I replaced it and that seemed to solve the problem. Also, I found a loose common ground connection that I corrected, and that may have been why I was getting some intermittent operation early when this was happening. I made this video because I did not see a lot of information on the internet specific to my model of Suburban furnace. Please note that there is a 40-page Suburban RV furnace service and training manual out there on the internet, and the videos by the RV repairwoman were very helpful in my diagnosis once I had the furnace removed and opened up. I originally took the motorhome back to Tiffin, where they added a return air register and supposedly replaced the furnace with a different model. The furnace seemed to work fine initially, so I assumed that the problem had been fixed. However, at the next winter season, the intermittent operation problem reoccurred, and eventually there was no ignition of propane. To diagnose the problem for my furnace, I had to remove the furnace from its location under a bed. I disconnected the power and ground, the thermostat wires, along with isolating and disconnecting the propane. I then removed the retaining screws that held the enclosure to the cabinet floor, and then I slid the furnace off its combustion vent air tubes to lift it out. The cell switch and the thermal switch, which are typical failure points, and the circuit board are not easily accessible for diagnosis from outside the enclosure for this model. So I had to remove a retaining screw and slide the furnace out of its enclosure. However, the enclosure panels had been pressed in during manufacturing or installation into this motorhome, making removal unusually difficult. Bending the panels slightly out from the inside made going back into the enclosure much easier. Once out, I could test the cell switch and thermal switch. I also temporarily reconnected the 12-volt power, ground, and thermostat wires and checked for voltage for the wiring diagram. While tracing wires, that is when I noticed that the rivet that bonded the common ground to the cabinet was loose. I added a separate wire to ground to solve that problem. I was still not getting ignition, so I disconnected the thick red wire from the igniter component on the circuit board and held it extremely close to its connection in order to look for arcing, which did not occur. I replaced the circuit board and reconnected the furnace and witnessed the igniter spark through the observation port. I let the furnace cycle a few times, so I declared victory and finished my reinstallation. Hopefully this video has been helpful, and look forward to more in the future because I'm sure I'll have more things to fix.